Hi, my name is Janelle, and as important as therapy can be, it can also be very pricey. And because you are putting your hard-earned money into these sessions along with your precious time, you want to be able to get the most out of your therapy sessions. So today I'm going to provide you some tips of what I've learned throughout my years of being in therapy and how to make it as effective as possible with the amount of time that you're given. It does depend on your therapist, but usually the range of time per session would be about 50 minutes to an hour. You can choose to see a therapist every other week or once a month, but usually for most patients it tends to be at least once a week. There have just been therapists that I've seen that have not really been effective at all for me, and based off of all those therapists I've seen, this is kind of what I've gathered for myself. So take what you will with the advice or tips I give you. Obviously, not all of these may work for you, but these are just what have worked for me. So you can just take whatever you want from this video, incorporate whatever you'd like. Therapy can really make a difference, and you want to get the most out of your therapy so you can get the most out of life. So yeah, let's get started. So the first tip that I have for therapy sessions to make the most out of them is do your homework. Usually therapists will give you homework to do to kind of help you improve outside of sessions. So you want to be able to do these assignments so that you can discuss it with your therapist when you get back, about things that you learned. You can reflect on the assignment. You can kind of discuss your issues you had with the assignment. Find a way to motivate yourself. So for me, with my assignments, what motivated me was by treating my therapy homework like it was school homework. I know that method might not work for everybody, but it personally worked for me because I was very academic when I was in school, and I really held myself responsible for deadlines. So having that mindset when it comes to my therapy assignments really motivated me to do those assignments. So just find a way to motivate yourself. It might not be that specific method, but just trying to find a method that works that will motivate you to get those tasks done so that you have them ready for when you have your next session. I can show you an example of a homework assignment I was given. So I was tasked with making a happiness jar, and basically each day I was supposed to write one thing that I was happy about. And there were other ways that I had to encourage myself to do this assignment other than the school mentality. Just making it aesthetic helped me out with this assignment. So you can just find different ways to make the assignment work for you as well. So that's my first tip for sure. So the second tip that I wanted to mention is to journal. Journaling just helps you with venting or talking about your emotions, your feelings, your thoughts, whatever you want without thinking. It helped me realize a lot of things that I wouldn't have realized if I didn't write it down. Journaling is a very helpful tool, not just for yourself, but also it can be used and utilized in your sessions. I'd recommend the idea of bringing your journal in to share with your therapist. Not only does it help you have something to talk about with your therapist, but it also kind of gives you some sort of accountability. So it's like kind of going back to the homework aspect of therapy. Showing someone else that you did it, even though you necessarily don't have to prove anything, because that's what worked for me. Even if it wasn't really necessarily an assignment that I was assigned, it gave me some sort of motivation to do that activity. If your therapist recommends it as homework, there you go. You have a 2-in-1. You're doing an assignment, but you're also getting something out of it for yourself, and it's giving back to your therapy sessions. So it really just, it's like a cycle. It really helps you out. The third tip that I have kind of goes back to the journal, the previous tip, but basically, if you don't journal, I guess this tip would be more so for you, but I'd recommend just writing down things that you want to discuss between your previous session and your next session. Most likely it'd be better if you did this list on your phone, if you like texted it to yourself or put it on your notes app. That's the most, I think, effective way to make sure that you have the list with you at your session, because you pretty much always have your phone with you. I'd recommend the phone method, but if you like to write it down on a piece of paper, that's fine too. But you might forget to bring the piece of paper. That's something that I've done. So I just recommend making a list of the things, jotting down whatever you want to discuss so you don't come empty-handed. Because in sessions where I've come empty-handed, it was kind of hard for me to really feel like I got the most out of my sessions, because I felt like I didn't achieve every point that I wanted to. So I think jotting down just really helps it become more streamlined. So I'd recommend jotting things down for sure, especially if you don't journal. That's very important. Tip number 4, don't be afraid to politely tell your therapist if the session's not going the way you'd like it to. Remember that you are paying for these sessions. If in that time frame you want to get the most out of it, you have to make sure that the things that you want to talk about are being addressed. So let me give you an example. There was a session where I wanted to talk about how I was feeling lost and my career path. But I guess something I said during that session, my therapist kind of took it on a tangent and brought it more so towards the social aspect of my life. Yes, that was something I wanted to talk about in my sessions, but not during that specific session. I didn't stop my therapist. When in reality, I just wanted to focus on the career/purpose aspect. So that's just an example of what I mean when I say don't be afraid to redirect your session back to where you want it to be. Make sure to mention it to your therapist that, oh, can we go back to this discussion? Can we leave that topic for another time? Because I made the mistake of not doing that and, you know, not feeling fulfilled out of my sessions, feeling like I didn't get what I wanted out of it, if that makes sense. Making sure that what you want to talk about, you talk about, especially if it's in relation to a certain event that's coming up. And you don't want to go on a tangent, you just want to talk about that event for the majority of your session. For me, for example, like if I had an interview coming up, I wanted to make sure I talked about the interview with my therapist before I had the interview. So just being sure to redirect when necessary, when you feel like it's necessary, because obviously it's your session. Tip number 5 that I would recommend kind of goes back to journaling, but I would recommend recording your mood daily. Just tracking your mood can really be helpful for not only you to kind of see how you've been feeling the past week, but also for your therapist. When your therapist asks you, how have you been doing? You can kind of bring up those emotions, kind of, you know, look back or remember your tracker, or you can bring your tracker to your session, especially if you don't have a list of what you want to talk about. Talking about your feelings for the past week can be very beneficial to initiating conversations and deeper discussions. So with the mood tracking, it gives you more of a streamlined idea or picture, and it gives the therapist a more simplified version of how you've been doing. It's just easier to reflect on it. In comparison to journal entries, it's kind of hard to look back on those because you might have written a lot, and to like look at all of those words, I don't think you'd want to reread all of that. I mean, you can choose to reread, but sometimes I don't even want to read my own journal entries. If you journal, you could always just add that on and just put like a little thing on your journal that's like, today I'm feeling, or you could just use little like smiley faces, sad faces. You can just use faces. Doesn't have to be words. So yeah, that's why I recommend tracking your mood. Even if you still journal, I'd recommend tracking your mood. But you could obviously track your mood without journaling if you choose not to journal. But I mean, all of these things you could interconnect, honestly. Tip number 6. What I'd recommend is to reflect on your session. Whether that might be taking time to yourself to just think about it after having the session, how you feel, if it was a good session, if it was a bad session. There was this journal that I purchased on Amazon. It was a mental health journal. So this was not my idea. I got this idea from that journal. Basically, reflecting on your session. What was your mood before you entered the session? And then what was your mood after the session? Kind of talking about what you discussed, what you got out of the session, those type of things. It helps you realize what was effective for you, and reflecting really helps with that discovery aspect. So just figure out what works for you. And then you can also bring it up to your therapist. Like, I found that this works for me, this doesn't work for me. And then now your therapist will know, and then they can implement it for future sessions. So it's very beneficial for you, but also your therapist and for your overall sessions. So reflecting can be very, very powerful and can very much determine your future sessions if you think about it. Especially if you were to discuss it with your therapist. It can really determine where your sessions end up going and how effective they end up being. Because once your therapist finds what works for you, then you can really tailor and get the most out of your sessions. Reflect on your therapy sessions. Ever think about that? Reflecting on your sessions. I didn't think about that until I got a journal that told me to reflect on my therapy sessions. And I was like, why didn't I ever think of doing this? Because it was very, very informative. Tip number 7, be open to exploring possible options or methods that the therapist might bring up. So there might be some methods or exercises that a therapist might ask if you want to try. Don't shy away from them, even if it sounds odd to you at the beginning, because there have been exercises that therapists have tried to get me to do that I was originally like, oh, that sounds funny, that sounds weird. But once I actually tried it, I understood why they asked me to try it. Because these therapists, they know what they're doing, okay? They went to school, they're qualified, they have experience. So obviously, you know, you want to take their recommendations. Obviously, their recommendations might not work for everyone, but it might work for you. So just give it a try. You might think it's weird at first, but then once you do it, you'll like understand so much more after. So for example, a therapist that I had wanted to utilize a type of therapy that was specialized for children, but they also utilized it for adults as well. And it was sand therapy, I believe is the method. But basically, there's a bunch of sand within a table, and my therapist had a bunch of figurines, and I had to pick which figurine spoke to me, and I placed them in different parts of the sand to represent my past, my present, and my future. And then we talked about the figurines that I put down, and it made me realize so much more than I had expected. I thought it was very silly when I thought about it in the first place, but I was like, I should just try it. You know, it doesn't hurt to try. And it actually brought a lot of enlightenment to me. And I really enjoyed that session because it was something that I was not expecting out of the ordinary, but it made me realize so much. So I really got so much out of that therapy session. So don't be afraid to try new things with the therapist. They might recommend, you know, meditating or doing a mindfulness exercise. Whatever they might recommend to you, don't be so against it. Kind of, if you're kind of hesitant, ask more questions, and then, you know, give it a try if you can. It doesn't hurt, and sometimes it might not work, but at least you know, hey, next time we're not going to do that anymore. You never know until you try it, kind of like with life. So if you have that option, if a therapist asks you to try a method or wants to do an exercise with you, don't be so against it. Be willing to give it a try and just explore the options. And my last tip is, if you want to have the most effective sessions, sometimes it takes finding the right therapist. One thing that I do want to just caution you is don't switch a therapist just after one session. Obviously, you want to get to know the therapist, have them get to know you, get a feel for the sessions, and just give it some time. Don't just change therapists right away if you feel like it's off, because that might just be a preliminary feeling. So be sure that you've had quite some time with them before you decide, okay, it's not working for me, I'm going to find another therapist. So that's just something that I like to note, is just don't switch or change a therapist too quickly just based off of first impressions or how you feel at the first few sessions. Give it some time, feel it out. Don't just jump ship right away. So that's something to keep in mind when you follow this or consider this tip. Be sure that it is the right decision to make, because it's very important that you give a therapist a chance first. And you know, sessions can improve, or once you get into the thick of things, you might be feeling the therapist more and more. It depends as time goes on. So give it a few sessions. You could always try and work things out with your current therapist, but at the end of the day, if you decide, just think it through before you decide to change a therapist. If you're just not feeling your therapist, that's okay. It's honestly fine. Therapy is kind of like having a relationship. You know, each therapist will be different and they will have their own methods and their own opinions and their own thoughts. So if the therapist you're with isn't really working for you, don't be afraid to go and find another therapist, because it might take some time before you find the right therapist, because your first therapist might not be the right fit for you. It's kind of like finding a partner or finding a friend. Not every therapist will work for you, and I didn't realize that until I was like years into my therapy. There were times where I would just stick through with a therapist because I was like scared to say something or to change and make a whole hassle for my family and myself. That's something I'd recommend if you feel like no matter how many sessions you have with this therapist, it's like going nowhere, you're not making any progress, you don't feel like it's beneficial for you, then it might be time, it might be a sign to go and find another therapist. Finding that right therapist can make the world's difference. I hope that these tips that I've given you today you can take into your own sessions, and hopefully they're beneficial for you. Obviously, not all these tips will be helpful for everyone. It depends on who you are as a person and your therapist and your sessions. It just depends on your circumstances. So take what you will with them and do what you must. But yeah, these are just a bunch of tips that I've learned over the years. I'm not a professional by any means. I did get a degree in psychology, but I'm not a professional or I'm not licensed. This is just based off of like my personal experience and my however so years of being in therapy, because I've been in therapy for quite some time. So this is just like personal things that I've learned throughout my journey. So yeah, I hope that this video helped. Whatever tips and tricks you took from it, I hope that you can incorporate it somehow, because at the end of the day, we just want to feel better, and that's what therapy is for. Just keep in mind with sessions, it's important to have consistency and clear communication. That is also, you know, the best way to get effective sessions. If you have any other helpful tips or suggestions for getting the most out of your sessions, you can share it down below in the comments and I'd love to read it, and I'm pretty sure other people watching this video would love to hear what you might have. Hopefully you got something out of this video, but even if you didn't get anything out of this video, I don't know. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it gave you some sort of enlightenment. I wish you all the best of luck with your therapy sessions and your personal growth and journey. And that's it for me. That's it for now. And I'll see you all when I figure it out. Bye.